Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to our regular meeting, monthly meeting of the King County Regional Homeless Board, Homeless Authorities, Implementation Board's monthly meeting. I will acknowledge that we do have a mission statement and we have a theory of change. Theory of change is if we're going to build a system that's going to assist those people who are most vulnerable, have them at the table and give them true agency at the table. That being said, I hereby call this meeting to order and ask Naomi to take a roll.
Thank you, Harold. Carrie Anderson. Nate Caminos.
Here.
Paula Carvalho.
Here.
John Chelmanack.
Here.
Gordon McHenry. Harold Odom.
Here.
Damian Patnaw.
Here.
Adrian Quinn.
Here.
Michael Ramos.
Here.
Sarah Rankin. Simha Reddy.
Sorry, here.
Juanita Spotted Elk. We do have quorum with 8 members present.
Thank you, Naomi. I did not hear, was it Juanita here?
Juanita is not present.
Thank you. So just a reminder, this meeting will be conducted in the Zoom. All attendees will be muted until public comment. For our panelists, we just ask that you raise your hand if you have something to say by pushing that invisible mute button or unmute button. If you're calling on the phone, it's *6. This meeting will be recorded. Everything you say, all written notes in the chat or anything between panelists will be taken down and recorded for this meeting. We also will have public comment around 2:15. We allow 10 minutes for public comment, 2 minutes per person. If you like to now put your name and where you're calling from in the chat, we'll build a queue. And when that queue, when we start public comment, we'll pull from that queue. We also have land acknowledgement today. I've asked Anita Reed to do a land acknowledgement. And is she on the call?
Yes. I just want to start by thanking you all for being here today. And let's just take a moment and acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. The Duwamish are a Lushootseed speaking native tribe, American tribe. This tribe descends from at least 2 distinct groups before intense contact with people of European ancestries, the people of the inside and the people of the large lake, and continues to evolve both culturally and ethnically. Did you know that the Duwamish were the first signatories on the Treaty of Point Elliott in 1855, signed by Chief Sayel, who was chief of the Duwamish and Suquamish tribes? Today, some Duwamish people are enrolled in the federally recognized Tulalip tribes of Washington, as well as the Muckleshoot tribes. Their longhouse today stands across the street from where one of the largest villages was located before it was burned down by settlers in 1895. Again, thank you. May we continue to recognize and uplift the people who made it possible for us to be here.
Thank you, Zanita. And now for consent, I'll turn it over to Seema. Is Simha still there?
I am. I'm sorry, I got muted, or I muted myself on accident. Zanita, thank you for that. On our consent agenda today, we're seeking board approval for the draft minutes from the February meeting. Is there a motion to approve those February meeting minutes? From Adrian, and do we have a second?
I second.
Thanks, Paula. All in favor of approving the February draft minutes, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? All right, the minutes from the February meeting are approved. So we're transitioning now to our public comment period. We now have 10 minutes for public comment. As Harold said earlier, if you wish to comment and have not already typed your name and city in the chat box, please do so now. Each individual who will be given 2 minutes to comment, and you'll be unmuted and called on in the order that you sign up. When you reach the end of the 2 minutes, we'll ask you to finish your comments so that others may speak as well. Public comment is now open.
At this time, I do not see anyone in the chat or raising their hand. Just a reminder that you can raise your hand as an attendee to be called on for public comment.
Thank you, Naomi. Let's hold it for a few more seconds in case anybody's feeling shy. Well, seeing no one signing up for public comments, why don't we go ahead and transition to the next section of our meeting today. And that'll be our CEO report. Mark?
Hello. Mark Jones, they, them pronouns for the record. I think I'm supposed to say that, and I normally forget. So I'm doing it this time. I have a lot. I've got 10 minutes and I've got a lot. Let's see what I can do. Oh, we actually saved time because there wasn't public comment. So great. This works out in my favor today. I'm going to share my screen. I do have slides. Is everyone able to see those? Fantastic. Quick update. I'm going to walk through our update today, through some of our key initiatives by division, and then also some broad things that affect the entire agency. So first up, looking at our program and system performance division, they continue to work with agencies to finalize project service agreements. Those are our contracts. A couple things on contracting that I would just lift up. So we have about 268 contracts that are in the process of being finalized. We're about halfway through that in terms of contracts being final. We had a couple of administrative delays, the biggest of which was the Omicron surge, which wiped out both RHA and provider capacity for about the month of January. In fact, at one of our large provider meetings in January, folks asked us to delay the implementation of the contract so that they could focus on keeping folks alive. Additionally, folks were out sick all the time. So they're just like between the shift in work focus and then the impacts on staff, it simply was not possible for us to meet our initial deadline. That said, we are humming through at this point, and I anticipate that all the contracts should be final in the next week or so. Invoices have already started to roll out, and in some instances where there has been some concern in terms of provider cash flow, we have expedited invoices and expedited checks. There is impact there. I don't want to mislead any of the board members or the public, but I feel like we are on track. As a number of folks saw, as of the 28th of February, we have retired the VI SPDAT permanently in King County. As folks may or be aware, the SPDAT has for a long time produced really significant disproportionalities in terms of outcome by race and ethnicity, in terms of who has access to which housing options. During COVID, we implemented something, and this actually predates me and the authority. And so actually a shout out to the coordinated entry for all team that was then at DCHS. implemented something called COVID prioritization, or affectionately CoPri, which allowed us to directly consider a number of factors that previously had not been eligible inside coordinated entry activity in terms of, history, attachment to historically marginalized communities, gender identity in different ways, sexual orientation in different ways, which allowed us to drive towards equitable outcomes in a very different way. So we're happy to be able to move towards that as a permanent framework. We also recognize that there's still a little bit more work to do around how coordinated entry functions. And so I don't want either board members or the public to think that this is now we are done figuring out how coordinated entry works. There is still more work to do, but we will no longer be using the SPDAT. Our program performance division continues to staff up and is now scheduling their own site visits with providers and folks across the county. We also, I'm really proud of this actually. So we received a complaint from some of our native serving organizations in terms of how the emergency housing vouchers were being deployed and what flexibility they had to move those vouchers towards folks who in the framework were defined as marginally housed, and so not immediately eligible for emergency housing vouchers because the vouchers were being prioritized for folks who were literally homeless, right? Because of that feedback, the authority, felt like it was a sustained argument, but we also felt like, in keeping with our values and how the policies around the emergency housing vouchers were set, that the authority should not simply waive that policy, right? We set the policy through a community process in collaboration with the LEC, and so we did not feel like it was our role to simply then change the policy without having a dialogue. So we asked that those organizations present, their argument to the LEC. The LEC then voted on a motion to support shifting those EHVs and their deployment so that they could be used for, categories 2 and 3. I just think that's really great. I think that's like theory of change in action, right? Where it is the community making decisions about community resources, and we serve as, a convener and an administrator, but we are not the decision-making entity. We are just facilitating process. So I'm really proud of how that turned out. And I know that there was a lot of emotion on some, I think on all sides of that actually at some points. But I'm happy with what we were able to do there. And I hope to see more of that in the future. Speaking of EHVs, we have about 1,500 applications submitted, about 1,200 issuances, and about 205 lease ups. So we are basically done with issuing. We are very close to the total allotment of vouchers that the community received. We lag behind on lease ups. And just as a reminder, the lease ups are coordinated by the 3 housing authorities, not by us at the homelessness authority. I want to be clear, I'm not throwing them under the bus on that one. Our market is very bad. And that is always going to be the issue with tenant-based vouchers in our market is it is simply real tough to get someone into housing with a tenant-based voucher. And so our continued advocacy for the ability to project-based vouchers is going to be really essential if the Biden-Harris administration moves forward with releasing more vouchers into the ecosystem. We do need that flexibility in some of our high-density markets, which is not just Seattle, King County, but also looking at our colleagues in LA and New York and other folks who have similar housing issues. On RFPs, so the Program and System Performance Division finalized the recommendation on the non-congregate RFP that we had been running. That recommendation has come to me. I had a couple questions. Those questions have mostly been answered. And so we are very near the official conclusion of that process. Again, I feel really good about it. One thing I think that was very different is, again, just that, like, you know, it was not just folks who are authority staff who were engaging with rating the applications. The community rated the applications. We had representatives from the advisory board. We had representation from like literally just a community member who had not like worked in homelessness services and like had no connection to the space, but was like, I would like to, you know, participate in this process, right? Again, I feel really good about any process we run that actually is about the community allocating its own resources and us serving as the vehicle for that and not the driver. We will release an RFP for safe lots later this month. So as you recall, through the Seattle budget process, we received an additional allocation to fund some safe parking programs, and that RFP will hit the streets shortly. Community impact, that is our data and analytics division. So they have completed 12 workshops with about 200 folks to co-design the qualitative research component of our point in time count. As you will recall, we are running our point in time count now because we received a methods exception. That methods exception allowed us to move both the date range of the point in time count and add on our qualitative research element. Based on those workshops, the community impact team drafted some interview questionnaires, and we have been training LEC members and authority staff to conduct interviews, which started today. We are using a respondent-driven sampling protocol, which I'm happy to talk about with any board members who want to wonk out about research methodology. But we're using a respondent-driven sampling protocol where we will engage folks through about 10 hubs across the county over the next 4 weeks, and we anticipate roughly 1,000 interviews with folks who are living unsheltered. I feel good today about this. No one has done this. No one has done this. And so regardless of what happens next, we as a community will have collected more direct information from people who are unsheltered in our community in terms of what are their barriers to accessing our services and like where are the problems in what services we offer than any other community I'm aware of from a qualitative perspective. So really excited about how that information allows us to reshape what we offer and to drive the system into being a better experience for folks who are unsheltered. As I mentioned, we're using a hub and spoke approach to location deployment with a combination of wave and capture recapture sampling, which happy to talk about with any wonks. But again, the researcher in me is jazzed about this. Like, we are going to be able to talk about things and know things in really verifiable ways that are not just, oh, I heard a story, in ways that are going to be transformative for us. The Ombuds office continues to work closely with the LEC to determine the structure and has also been working with stakeholders to draft an investigation protocol and a charter so that the function and scope and role of the office is really clear. Katara Jordan, who leads that office, is a tremendous asset to the agency and also has been really, really keen on, and I just, again, making sure that it's clear, we have been talking about investigations through like a restorative justice lens and through a lens of, again, building a better ecosystem, not through a lens of punishment. So I think it's just really important to lift up how she continues to sort of shepherd that work in the direction of being truly transformative and not replicating structures that we've seen be oppressive in other spaces. Partnership for Xero. Heidi Wiersma has been working closely with the city, the county, and the LEC to stand up our unified command center. We have hired 4 peer navigation co-directors. I am jazzed about it. They will all begin on the 21st. It's going to be so great. They're going to be so great. The people we hired are so cool. I'm so happy about it. As they come on board and have had the opportunity to separate from their previous places of employment, et cetera, you all get a chance to meet and interact with them. They are real fun. This is not just like me geeking, like they are phenomenal talents in this space. And we are really lucky that they have chosen to come work with us and are going to benefit from frankly having them around to talk to, and like it's really exciting for us. We've been working closely with Microsoft in a philanthropic partnership to develop an initial by name list app thing. I'm a millennial, theoretically. I should know how to talk about apps, but I guess I don't today. Really grateful again to Microsoft to be able to craft that partnership, because we certainly cannot afford their services. So really happy that they have come to the plate in that way. Our first community briefing around Partnership for Xero is tomorrow and is the beginning of an ongoing series of updates to the community. My commitment around Partnership for Xero has been that it will be so transparent, it will get boring. Like we will be updating y'all on like, hey, we added one person to the BNL. Like I want this to be so open, in part because I think that homelessness feels very mysterious in our community, and that is a disservice, right? Like everyone should understand what the nature of this work is, where it is complicated, why it is complicated, where it is easy, what is easy, and we should be able to engage with that. Mr. Odom, I see your hand up.
Yes, Mark, how are you doing? You're jazzed. I heard how you're doing. I want to start the last part that you said first. And I challenge this board and others to stop making homelessness such, it's kind of a anesthetizing air. We see homeless people all over, but if we listen to the mayor's office, if he served at the pleasure of homeless people, if we served at the pleasure of homeless people, would we have a job today? I hear what you're saying, but if that's to be truly what Xero is going to be about, then they need to uplift the homeless people and stop uplifting businesses. Because if somebody has no place to sleep and they sleep in a doorway, let it be. These are human beings and they need a place to stay. And if the city and the state and the government does not have a place for them to stay, then stop moving them from place to place to place. That's bad on their health. That's bad on the environment. It's bad on everything. Treat people as like they're serving at their pleasure. Because I have not, it just boils my blood when I hear that we're going to do something and clear the third street. Why? Why are we so intentional about doing that? Is it truly to get people housed? Or are we doing something else for the pleasure of the mayor, who's running for a different office, I think? That's all I got to say on that.
Thanks, Harold. I will lift up for the purpose of the public that this agency does not support and does not participate in sweep activity. And the actions, I will simply say that some of the actions that have taken place are not actions that we were aware of, participated in the planning of, and don't offer any formal or informal support around, just to be very clear. The last two things on my update. So one is severe weather response. We did have another severe weather incident. In keeping with the differentiation that we've begun to use in terms of having both a harm reduction strategy for folks who are going to shelter in place outside and opening up spaces, right? We distributed $50,000 to agencies across the region to purchase emergency supplies for folks. We had daily coordination calls with providers in all subregions, had flyers for outreach and a regularly updated blog. We also will continue to utilize that tiered weather response for various levels of cold, heat, and smoke. And we've also put out a community survey to elicit feedback on our response to severe weather so that we can continue to modify it. One of the things I think that is also really important to note about severe weather, and as a preview of what we'll talk about for some of budget this year is we do need to restore cold weather and wet weather shelter, which we don't have as a region anymore, right? So many of those shelters switched over to being 365 days a year, and or were decommissioned at the outset of COVID because they were not able to move to being non-congregate. And so as a result, we simply, there's no capacity other than the severe weather shelters that we spin up during incidents that just allows for people to come inside during more broader seasons of inclement weather. And so we will need to focus through the budget on restoring that capacity. All right, just a couple more things. I'm actually going to skip sub-regional planning in my update because you will hear from Alexis directly. Skipping to admin and staffing, we have 45 folks who work here now. Every day I see people and I'm like, I didn't hire you. That's amazing. Which is just really great. About 61% of our staff are non-white. And the overall applicants in our pipeline, which we started to monitor, are 63% non-white and 37% white. We've been trying to pay more attention to how the diversity of our hiring looks both in hiring and pipeline. And about 50% of the folks who work here continue to identify as folks with lived experience, which is another thing we monitor pretty closely. So looking towards next year, and then I'm done. Budget, we are in conversation with the city and the county now about budget process. We are also in the process of redesigning our service offerings, and that will be connected to some of our final budget asks. We kicked that process off internally in the last week, and it will move into its external facing portion around the end of this month and run through a good portion of April. And we'll be holding engagements with stakeholders across the county to ask folks granular questions about program design, metrics, how do we know when we're successful, that kind of stuff that will help us, put more scaffolding on the regional action framework that is the basis for our 5-year plan, so that all of that work comes together. One additional thing I will just say about budget, and I can stop sharing my screen. But one additional thing that I will just say about budget is I anticipate that there will be, 2 things that are significant about the budget that we present to you all. One will be, my job. I think our job, I hope, is to ask for the amount of money we need. And if people tell us you can't have that amount of money, that's okay. But I will be presenting a budget that is at scale. And I just am going to say that now. I have asked Naomi to reach out to the budget committee so that we can begin having that conversation in a granular way next week. But I just want to lift that up. We will say, this is the amount of money it would cost to do this for 45,000 people, right? The other thing that I want to lift up is that, as I mentioned with severe weather, there are some granular lessons we've learned in our tenure already about things that we either need to restore or shift about the current system. And so you will see those kinds of things called out in the budget as well. And that's all I have.
Mark, thank you for the whirlwind review of kind of what you've been up to. It sounds like it's been a lot of work. I had a couple of questions, but we have about 5 to 10 minutes to open it up to questions from the board. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask or comment on?
Yeah, I have a quick question, and I probably missed it. So Mark, we are doing the point in time count with the additional surveys. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we were never not doing a point in time count. We were always going to do, because if we just didn't do a point in time count, we would be out of compliance, right? And so what we are doing, we got a methods exception from HUD that allows us to move the dates that the point in time count happens to be the month of March, basically, and to shift the method that we do the counting through to be this respondent driven sampling method. We are more interested as an agency in the qualitative component, right? Because we know the count is not going to produce a number that is real for us, and that the administrative data is actually better to look at when we want to know how many people we need to serve. So our big focus is the qualitative data. We will produce a number, we will file that number, and then we will not talk about it.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Other questions from the group?
Mark, this is Pastor Anderson. I was so glad to hear in your report that our agency did not participate in the homeless sweeps. When you talk about providing shelter for those outside, what groups have you been contacting, or organizations such as churches, faith groups, or faith communities?
So we, in full transparency, we haven't done as good a job engaging our faith community to date as we need to. So one of the things that we have talked about this week as part of our service redesign is to have a more intentional connection with folks, either through the Interfaith Task Force or other faith collaboratives, in order to begin to have that conversation about the land that folks shepherd and what kind of engagement they want to have in support of the system.
Mark, I was curious about the emergency housing vouchers. It's fantastic we've been able to issue the vast majority of them. At least my understanding is, like, our various housing authorities, Seattle, King County, and Renton, don't actively engage in housing navigation for people to whom they issue a voucher. Is there any consideration for us potentially funding housing navigators through other agencies to help these folks actually get housed?
So some of that is happening already. So we did make it through last year's budget with some funding allocated towards emergency housing voucher service attachment. It is in process right now. The way that it was architected through the budget process, it is held at Seattle Office of Housing and has to be in collaboration with the authority. So I believe that we are close to finalizing the master service agreement that will navigate all of that. But we did get some money to support that. I think that, my hope, right, is that as we move into a more pure enriched system broadly, that these are the kinds of things that we're able to, directly support as the authority through that system.
So, this is John. If you would excuse me, I think we have enough people that I need to sign off for a few minutes, take care of a minor emergency at work, and then I'll rejoin the meeting. But I think you still have a quorum. Is that? I didn't want to leave you without a quorum.
Quorum. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Okay.
And actually, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind noting that both Patrick Carey Anderson and Gordon McHenry joined after our roll call. Oh, thank you very much. I just had one other question. With regards to the point in time count and the qualitative approach that you're taking, how is this different from the Count Us In survey that's been done in prior years, that also surveyed about 1,000 people, got some qualitative but mostly quantitative information?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's in what you just said. They did a survey. And so survey methodology is just functionally different from what we are doing, which is oral history methodology. So we're going out and doing semi-structured interviews where there are, it's all open-ended questions. It the only things that are hey, check this box are the demographic things, and are based in the questions themselves are based in the themes that people wanted to learn about that came out of those workshops, right? With the 200 folks that we did to say, hey, community, what should this do for us, right? So those are the key differences from an analytic perspective, right? So we're likely to use 2 frames of analysis on the amount of data that's going to come back. One will be thematic batching, where we'll just say, like, what are the themes in what we've heard, right? We are also likely to take a more what's called a grounded theory approach, where we index the data to build out like theories of like why things are difficult for people or how they might be better, right? So it is a much more straightforwardly qualitative endeavor that is not really focused on the kind of statistical analysis that the We Are In survey was generating.
Thanks. We'll say the one quantitative piece of information that was particularly helpful from the Count of Seven surveys was duration of homelessness, like time since last stably housed. Will you be able to pull that from the kind of questions that you're asking?
Yes, we do have a question that is specific to, so there's a sequence of questions about midway through the interview that ask, how long have you been experiencing homelessness? Is this your first time experiencing homelessness? If not, can you, talk to us about the other times you have experienced homelessness? So we'll be able to derive that information from those questions.
Thanks, Mark.
No problem.
I have one more question about that. As far as the survey goes, I mean, specifically thinking about young people, does it ask questions like, I guess I'm thinking like more around prevention. So like knowing what systems young people might have been coming out of, whether it be like juvenile justice or behavioral health or foster care. I just wonder if there's a question that kind of signals what system they might have touched before becoming homeless.
Yeah, so we do have, so we are not, this is actually very important. Thank you for raising this. We are not doing interviews with anyone under the age of 18 because they can't, you have to go through informed consent and you can't consent, right? And that's not, I want to be very clear for our viewing public, that is not adultism. That is just like legally, they cannot consent. We can have a different conversation about whether or not that's valid. And so what we do have, though, are questions in the protocol that ask questions about other system involvement, inclusive of criminal legal, foster care, et cetera, right? So we will have a window into seeing what subset of folks lift up that they touched those kinds of systems that touch young people. We also are not collecting demographic information from young people, right? So if someone shows up and they're under the age of 18, we won't, go through informed consent to do an oral history, but we will still say, hey, if you're open to it, would you fill out this slip of paper with, the demographic information so that you can be counted and we can, model you into the number that we do provide.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Any last questions or comments before we move to the next point on our agenda?
So, Mark, I know we spoke about this last month on the moving contracts over, but do you know when we're going to start seeing maybe a worksheet for, and I don't know how to put this, I don't want to call it a name, but processes are gone through the equity worksheet. I know we have an equity officer now. Are we going to start putting things out, even for the board, as we're making decisions, a framework of how we should look at certain things? Is that going to be coming soon?
That's a really good reminder. And particularly as we go into budget. So my answer is yes, that will be coming soon. And I will work on that with the budget committee next week and with Aaron and other folks on the authority staff to make sure that you all have the supports to look at things the same way that we are looking at things internally.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for reminding me. I will make a note.
Well, Mark, thank you for the report and for all the work. Really excited now to share that our vehicle residency work group is here with us today, and it's going to be presenting on all the hard work they've been doing to help us better support our residents staying in vehicles, sort of obviously. Let me turn it over to them now and ask them to take over.
So hi, we're starting off with our vehicle residency work group. And why do we have a vehicle residency work group? Can you hear me? Okay. Vehicle residents make up as much as half of the unsheltered homeless population in King County. There has been historically a lack of recognition that vehicle residents need specific and targeted approaches that often differ from people living unsheltered in encampments or in other locations. There has been a shortage of research or work on the best practices regarding services for vehicle residents. Now I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. My name is Dawn Shepard. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently the system outreach navigator, the system outreach coordinator, REACH, and have been participating with the vehicle residency work group since its conception. About 50% of the people that are participating in this work group right now are people with actual lived experience. And 100% of the people that are participating in the work group are folks who work directly with people living in vehicles. So we are just here as representatives of the subgroups that we've determined are necessary to do this work. And we're going to be able to present to you a brief outline of the scope of the work that we're doing and the intention. And Patricia was nice enough to explain to you the reasons why this body of work has been separated into its own entity, and we're looking at it more specifically as its own body of work. So moving forward, now that she's explained the why, I'm going to turn it over to Chanel to talk to you about the purpose of it.
Hi, Linda, I thought you were going to start.
Yes, I am.
There you go.
I'm
I'm
Linda
sorry.
Taylor. I'm the VP of Housing and Financial Empowerment for the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. And our purpose is to provide a community of practice. We are all together knowing bits and pieces of what actually goes on and people living in their vehicles. And now we have come together and put all of these things together as one, and so we don't overlap what we do. And so it's really, really working out very, very well. We at the Urban League have been running a pilot program with a few of the churches, and we like to, we've called it a road to housing and not a road to parking. So we only take vehicles here, and we don't take the RVs and the other things that our group is looking into. So it's really, really provided a great thing. We're also providing input to KCRHA about the funding we need, about our advocacy priorities, just about some of the things that we have run into while we're running this program. We at the Urban League have been given some of the Section 8 vouchers. And out of the 32 vouchers that we've given, everyone has signed up for a voucher. And there are several people that we've housed already and put with some of our other funding sources to get furniture. And Seattle Housing Authority has done a wonderful job. We're working with Xero to help find places, because we're finding a lot of people have blemished credit. And I say that lightly when I say blemished, but we really need to go. So they enter some of our credit and budgeting programs here at the Urban League, and we continue to work with them. And this model is working well for us.
So we're also here to lift and respond to the system gaps and advance opportunities and funding and coordinate pragmatic needs, and to hold the KCRHA accountable and responsive for addressing vehicle residency, which basically means I'm just here to put my 2 cents in, because I'm living in an RV, I'm living in a bus part-time, and I noticed and they need to hear from people that live the life, in order to I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, basically I'm here for my 2 cents. That's what I'm here for. All right, that's it.
Next slide.
Thank you, Chanel. That was wonderful.
No, it wasn't. It was usually my 2 cents is a lot more.
Okay, my name's Kelly, and through the wonder of the vouchers, I'm recently housed. And obviously, I'm going to talk about attendance. I think this was briefly touched upon. This is a group of people with current and past lived experience, managers, hosts of safe lots and zones, vehicle outreach providers, policy experts in vehicle residency, advocacy groups from across the county who are all orientated toward vehicle residency rights. And I've been a part of the vehicle residency group pretty much, I think, since the inception as well. And I've met through just these meetings. I'm amazed at the number of people that are working for us already. And I'm hoping with these subcommittees, we can all be working more strongly together. We do have 5 subcommittees. They're the interim infrastructure work group, the immediate needs work group, outreach subcommittee, advocacy subcommittee, and emergency response committee. And you'll hear from all of these groups detailing what they're specifically looking at and interested in. And they really cover all of King County. So it's nice to get some information basically from all of King County. It's as well as Seattle. Most of us attend all of these work groups. It's because there's so much crossover issues. And so we basically, I think, are really learning from each other, even though some of us, we just have a very specific focus. And I am now going to turn this over to Karina.
Hi, I'm Karina O'Malley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Lake Washington United Methodist Church Safe Parking Program, which is in Kirkland. And it is, I believe, the largest and also the oldest continuously running safe parking program in the state of Washington. Bill and I co-chair the interim infrastructure group. And what that means is just places for vehicle residents to be. That's the infrastructure. This includes both safe lots, the more traditional off-street place for cars and RVs to spend time, and also safe zones, which are on-street areas, typically where vehicles are already, where you could put in additional services or invite outreach folks to be able to have sustained contact with folks because they are not being asked to move, which is what really breaks down the ability of outreach workers to offer services. We also talk about the other physical aspects of supporting people living in vehicles and what physical structures are needed in these places of support. Basically, we are trying to provide recommendations on things like potential sites for these places through all kinds of avenues, real estate brokers, folks with lived experience, maps of where pump outs are happening right now, and also from just what is available and what might work. We'll provide recommendations for evaluating these sites, especially through folks' lived experience of what works and what doesn't work, and the experience of successful programs that are already running. We also are ready to help with design and implementation of these programs once they get started, including creating metrics of success, which may not be based on the traditional outputs that depend on number of people housed. We're looking at different criteria that don't depend on how many places there are to house people, right? That these programs wouldn't have control over. We're also talking about how other government agencies impact the strategies that we're coming up with to support people living in vehicles. Again, asking folks to leave the site where they're parked is incredibly harmful. And so we need to work out strategies to collaborate with parking enforcement, other code enforcement, police, and other government agencies that impact the safety and well-being of folks who live in vehicles.
Thank you, Karina. So again, my name is Dawn Shepard. I use she, her pronouns. I'm actually filling in today for Patricia and Andrew, who are the co-chairs for our immediate needs group. And just to give a little bit of context for this, we do realize that many of the topics that we are working on in this body of work are overlapping. But in order for us to kind of get our hands around the work that we were doing, we did feel it was necessary to break down the work itself and all of the different things that we could anticipate when we started the group into these separate subgroups. The immediate needs group is sort of our most fluid group in that we're primarily focused on having a deliverable of the most harm reduction strategies possible as they come up with immediate needs. So this might be working on the immediate needs of clients who are living in vehicles right now, such as hygiene and like black water waste removal that's being done, or as Karina just mentioned, as we approach things like law enforcement needs that are sort of impeding the work that we're trying to do, or at least complicating it to some degree, talking about regular standard immediate needs that all folks living in vehicles, whether they are working or living in one of our safe lots or safe zones that we've talked about, or still living in the street and just being outreached by case managers, would be things like MAP programs, Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol shots, getting things like repairs done if folks are going to be needing to move. So as immediate needs come up for us, this is going to be a fluid group that is working to try to respond to in a way that we can then continue to use those best practices moving forward in all of the work that we're doing. The key deliverables on this particular subgroup is to be a harm reduction strategy approach for all the work and the recommendations that are being done for the individuals that are being forced to live in their vehicles because there is not adequate housing or shelter space available, parking for people to be able to live safely without being moved. So this is an outline that is supposed to be collaborative and a directed response from the harm reduction model in as many ways as possible.
Hello, I'm Bill Curlin-Hackett. I direct the Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness. We're doing work on the Vehicle Residency Outreach / Scofflaw project that was funded by Seattle and has been handed over to the regional authority. And we are the only intentionally dedicated vehicle outreach program at work right now. We're small, and yet at the same time, I think we have a lot to contribute to our conversation as you're hearing. We're very appreciative of the RHA and this group and how we're going to enlarge the scope of work toward those in vehicles. The areas that I'm also substituting for a few people today. So we're gonna work on that by name list you heard Mark bring up, where we begin to deal with clients by name in a way that can address the many different needs that come up for folks who live in vehicles. And there's always a laundry list of issues. We're going to create outreach best practices across all the folks who do outreach, and even encourage agencies that may not be doing outreach to reach out and consider that now. Almost every agency has somebody who's been in a vehicle as part of their clientele. So we need some best practices that are more consistent than we know they are right now. We also need service connections. We know that so many of the people in vehicles have a whole plethora of different types of issues going on. And we need to be able to address them to move them into better stability, whether they're in a safe lot or even getting into housing. I mean, even when we got some vouchers, we ran into obstacles like credit reports and other issues that are sort of hidden when people are living in vehicles, and they show up when we try to get them into housing. We're going to better define outreach. I know some people don't think outreach is necessary. There is no other way to engage people who are on the street without doing outreach, without being with them on the street. And that's the whole peer program that's being outlined, is to be with people. And we will outnumber the peers, I am sure. But nevertheless, we are wanting better definitions of what outreach can do and what outreach needs. And so that leads to the gaps and the opportunities. What more do we need? Where are the gaps? And right now the gaps far outweigh the opportunities. So we'll work on deliverables such as the guide for best practices. And we have a lot of very good folks who are at work with us who've done this long time and even recently, many lived experience folks contributing their views so that we can begin to shape best practices that will continue to evolve. Metrics, I am never a big fan of metrics, but I know the system loves them. I tend to call it data-driven crazy, but we will have to provide metrics, and we'll set up methods to do that. Recommendations for the by name list. That's probably the only way we're really going to be able to help people with all the different things that are afflicting and creating harm, is shape this and keep reshaping it as we learn more. And then detailing connections to permanent housing pathways that exist for vehicle residents. In other words, let's finding ways to get them into long-term stability, short-term stability. We are even using in our program right now, separate from RHA's request, a way of asking whether someone needs immediate removal from an RV that is total junk, whether they'd be ready to go to a lot for a year or two in terms of the quality of their RV, or whether they have an RV that they could go to similar to a mobile home lot, start paying rent and be stable. So some of what we're even doing now as we do our work is that type of investigation, because there's no one population out on the streets. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And Harold, I see your hand is up. We're actually going to hold questions until the very end, if that's okay with you, but I definitely want you to know that we see you. Is Jaja here? Okay, so my name is Dawn Shepard. I use she, her pronouns. I also co-chair the advocacy work group with Jaja. And if she's here and she wants to jump on at any point, please let me know. The advocacy subcommittee is supposed to be focusing on the things at a local, state, and national level that affect our clients that are living in vehicles right now. And our priorities are supposed to be for the vehicle residency work group. So there's a lot of advocacy work that takes place for a lot of different services or issues that are surrounding the homeless community. These are supposed to be issues that are directly related to people living in vehicles, that are separate and specific to people in the vehicles. So a lot of the group, like the House Bill 2075 with DSHS, affects everybody. And so those types of topics will be saved for like the outreach work group, as opposed to being talked about in this group. But this will be specifically about things like the long decision, parking enforcement, RCWs, the types of work that are going to directly intersect with folks who are being served as vehicle residents, which are different and separate from regular folks that are living in tents or structures on the streets. The idea for this work group is for us to encourage and build out our public education and awareness. Right now, what the public sees is a lot of people on their doorstep that are creating things like garbage and other criminal activities that they're connecting to these folks who are living in their vehicles, and where we need to really try to harness and to gain some traction in explaining to folks the nature of why people are living in their vehicles and the lack of political will that there's been so far to be able to provide direct services that are separate to people living in vehicles. I know that Bill mentioned on the last slide that they have been doing the only targeted contracted work specifically designed for vehicles for many years. And it was not until Reach, who I work for and is probably the largest provider of outreach in the city, until we moved away from the navigation team model of work that we were doing and into a neighborhood model, we were not contracted in any way to work with people in vehicles, and actually still are not contracted to do that work. But when we moved to the neighborhood model, it did not make any sense for us to be trying to work at an encampment where you have people living in a vehicle right next to somebody in a tent and say, no, you're not my client because you're living in a vehicle. All of the people that we encounter on the streets are, to our way of thinking, our reach clients, and need the same services and support. The reason that this work is so important to this group being formed has been that there hasn't been specific money that has been budgeted for the different needs that people have in vehicles. And there hasn't been specific contract work that's been done with providers other than scofflaw, where people have the resources to be able to address the different issues. So we've been doing our best to work with that at Reach. And I know a lot of other places like UGM have more started to include people in vehicles. For myself, I work down in the south end of Seattle, so highly densely populated area of vehicle and RV residents. And I just wouldn't be able to do my work out there if we weren't working largely with people who are living in vehicles. So the key deliverables that we're hoping for in this advocacy group are to get an overview of what's happening locally and nationally with policies that are already being driven in other areas and also in our area, and to advocate for the things that we need to see changed in order for us to better do this work. We're supposed to be advocating for the priorities that are specific to the work group. Like I said, the long decision is one of our top priorities right now, and something that we've just really started getting a chance to dig into. Lots of help, and thanks to Bill for that. And then increasing our public education and awareness with King County and all of its jurisdictions, trying to increase the political will to address the folks that are living in vehicles, since we have so many people that are homeless, and there's no way for us to address the homeless challenges that we're having in King County without including the people that are living in vehicles. And slide 8. I don't see Jaja here. So my name is Dawn Shepard. I use she, her pronouns. And I am filling in for Jaja. The immediate or the emergency response group has kind of been overlapping with some of the outreach stuff, in that we've been responding to severe weather conditions. We've been responding to contagious diseases. Primarily that started as a work group to have a working response when we have people that were sheltering in place for COVID. And then we expanded that to include all other contagious diseases like hepatitis, Shigella, and any number of other things that we run into in encampments where we have outbreaks. And as this relates to encampment sweeps, which we all know have gone into an uptick, not just in encampments, but also with the RV remediation that increased dramatically a few weeks ago, going from 2 RV remediations a month to 2 a week.
Dawn?
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but slide 8 is actually, it's actually slide 9 now. Which I know it's not very clear from the thing, but I'm willing to talk about this.
Please do, Kelly.
If you need to take a break.
Yes.
And I will assist you, Kelly.
Great, thank you so much, Linda. Linda and I co-chair this emergency response group. Initially, this was set up to be kind of a very short-term one-off group to deal with the cold weather response that was coming, and we needed something, we needed some good ideas quickly. But it's kind of morphed into more of a severe conditions type of emergency response, because there's a lot of things other than just freezing temperatures that can very badly affect people living in their vehicles. whether they're in Seattle or King County or wherever you're at. We've got things like due to climate change, or we've got heat, incredible high temperatures that none of us are used to dealing with, and none of our buildings are actually even built to accommodate. Very few buildings are set up to accommodate that. We've got smoke issues. Theoretically, we have potential for any type of catastrophe, an earthquake. It's going to be freezing tonight, and it's already March, which kind of makes you think it's not winter anymore. But again, climate's changing. So we've decided to make this a group in and of itself, to take care of not just severe natural conditions, but also contagious diseases, not just COVID. It could include even not contagious diseases. You could have a large camp could have a food poisoning issue that needs an emergency response quickly before other folks can come in and stabilize it. This is kind of like a boots on the ground, quick. Be really supportive of outreach folks. We're going to be the first ones there, and have available supplies and equipment for them to deal with that, with severe conditions, and encampment sweeps. I mean, even when we started this group, encampment sweeps, we seemed like we were getting a little bit of lead time to semi-plan for this, and now they're just happening. And all of those could certainly benefit from supplies. And so what we're going to recommend to King County Homeless Authority is our deliverables of what we need to do that, to be the boots on the ground rapidly. And working with all the groups that are here, we might, like Dawn's got some good lineups on getting food and hygiene supplies and that type of thing, that will eventually all come together. But if this happens on a Friday night, and everybody's gone home and there's an issue, we need food quickly. We need those hygiene supplies quickly. We need to be able to give the outreach people everything they need to be able to take care of that situation, because once they are on the ground, they're going to be dealing with the people and having to worry about that. Is it Dawn that has to go out to some and personally go get toilet paper? No, she should be dealing with people on the ground. And so one of the things we've been focusing on mostly is storage and having kind of a supply depot. And again, this is still something we're working on, but a supply depot, and then maybe some sub depots, hopefully on the east side. Because again, if you're talking about a severe winter weather response, nobody on the east side is going to probably be able to easily get over to someplace in Seattle and pick up, 50 or 60 blankets or sleeping bags or hand warmers easily. That type of thing should be available on the east side, and again, maybe in sub depots. But these are all of the things we're looking at and talking with everybody and all of the groups to just figure out the easiest and best way to support people who are providing support, as well as obviously those that need the support. And I think I'm the last slide. Oh,
that's correct. And
Linda, I forgot. I'm sorry. So the slide could maybe come back if you want to look at it again. But Linda's got some stuff to say too.
Many of us have already started these things in practice. For instance, Interfaith had some socks. I believe you guys had the abundance of socks. So through him, some of our other nonprofits and organizations were able to get the socks. RHA has recently given us dollars to assist us with some things. So we were able to go out and purchase some things in advance of cold weather events. And I understand we're having one coming up. So oftentimes when you're going home, you see homeless people out there and it crosses your mind, what are they going to do tonight? Because it is cold. It's colder than usual when you go home to your warm home. So we say to one another, what can I do? You can help. You can help the RHA authority to fund each of us properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I think the most exciting thing about the position that RHA is in the fact that RHA is so well positioned to be able to plan ahead and get in front of the emergencies and in front of this work that so many different agencies have been trying to do independently for a long time, overlapping a lot of work and duplicating some of that unnecessarily. So, you know, KCRHA is in a position for us to be able to have plans in place, develop best practices that we can share throughout the region, not just in the Seattle area, but have those plans in place so that there are mechanisms that sort of kick in the case of severe weather, where folks already know what their given part and their participation is supposed to be when we move forward trying to address and respond to best support our clients. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask those questions, and I will direct you to the appropriate person in that group that might be able to answer them. And then if there's any other anecdotal shares that anyone has from our work group, our presentation, they would like to contribute. Chanel, if there's anything else that you'd like to share with the group. Very much appreciate everyone on this board taking the time to hear about the work that we're trying to stand up here with vehicle residents, and to be able to support this work in providing the kind of funding that it's going to take for this whole new body of work, right? We're not just trying to streamline the work that's been done before, but this is really a new subset of homeless response that hasn't been addressed in the Seattle area for the 30 years that Seattle's really been trying to address this work. So I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to be able to work together and to have all of the agencies doing the work collaborate and come up with the best solutions possible. And I do see Patricia's hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to contribute a personal story that, you know, I've had a car since the moment I got my driver's license. And there's been 1 minute I was housed, the next minute I wasn't, due to different circumstances, DV and so forth. When I went into different programming shelters, there wasn't parking space outside. When I went into the encampments, they wanted me to get rid of my car or it got vandalized. When I still have that car, that's where I am. You know, this is something that gives me a sense of freedom and gives me more opportunity so that I can get jobs to also go to different places to live and so forth. I just wanted to know a personal story about why this happened, you know, because the shelters are a moment. You get 72 hours, then you leave, or the emergency sheltering, and then some of the other shelters, 30 days. You know, what happens after that if things don't align? So I just wanted to present that as just a personal story for those to understand why vehicle residency matters. And hopefully you hear my voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I think Chanel, your hand was up next.
I'm going to interrupt because my hand's been up since the
Oh,
entire.
Harold, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Your hand's been up for longer than anyone.
Yep. So I'm going to hold back my temper on this right now. But this is the implementation board, and we did invite you here to give you a platform that you have never had before, and I'm backing that. And I think you have to understand where I'm coming from on this. But yes, vehicle residency has not been given those platforms. People still die in vehicles. people still need those vehicles to run to when they have traumatic things going on with them, domestic violence, sexual assault. And we have to remember that women and children are on the street for the number one reason of domestic violence, sexual assault. When we think of this and those people who are more than almost 50% of those people who are homeless, how do we come to a decision to segregate people who are living in a tent, people who are living in a vehicle? We shouldn't be. Vehicles are cold when it's cold, and we wouldn't want our animals in there. We don't want humans in there. And when it's hot, those vehicles are just, they're baking units. And I'm surprised that you guys have scaled back in your passion. I expected you to be fire. You know, I've been on some of those work groups, and it's passionate. Each one of you has passion about it. And Bill Hackett, you've been doing this for a long time, and you introduced me to it, and I thank you for it. I just wanted the board to know that there's passionate people here, and they're holding back, and they have a lot of experience and stories to tell. That's all.
I think Chanel was going to speak, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So, am I muted? Okay, so I am not very good under pressure, sorry. But so I've been living in my vehicle for a long time, and I do believe that we need to have, we are a community and we want to park together, we want to work together. We don't want to have to be, our vehicles are our homes. And without our vehicles, we have no home. When they want to tow our home, we have nothing. There's no shelters that I'm not gonna go to shelter. I like where I live. And I want to live with my community, and I want to work together as a community. And when they move us, it makes it really hard to function. Basically, we don't have a place to live when they tow our homes. So it's really important for us to get this RV park started. Basically, I've been trying to preach the RV park for a long time to Dawn and everybody else. I've been begging people to help me please start this RV park, because we need a place to park that's permanent. Because just like the tiny homes, we deserve a place to be, and you guys aren't going to be able to house us all. So let us keep our houses. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm no good under pressure. But so thank you, and yeah, that's it.
Wonderful, Chanel. Thank you.
All right.
Bill?
I just want to add, the situation is dynamic. One thing we didn't present is we're trying to work with the city of Seattle on what I guess I will call being stymied by the public partnership. They've resumed the 72-hour move. I spent all day yesterday with someone whose van was towed just from an orange tag. They're not calling us out to do outreach to people who are at risk the way they used to. Something has changed administratively in the city of Seattle. So our mitigation, which we did for 11 years, is now damage control after it happens. So I encourage that Mark and others who are partners on this conversation with the city of Seattle escalate that as soon as possible. We are going to see a lot of people who don't understand the 72-hour rule is going to lead to impounds with just one orange tag and then an impound. We can't keep up with that. That's the city doing harm as a partner, and it should stop. So you can't control that. But one of the things we do need to put pressure on is to escalate and advance the conversations so we stop doing harm to the people. The court, I was in the court yesterday. They're dealing with the long decision very fairly. I was at the impound lot. I was at the DOL, and I got a battery. So we're walking people through, but that was all harm because the vehicle got towed. So I just encourage you to be partners in this. And as others have said, we have underspent on this for too long. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. So Harold, thank you so much for sort of calling out the fact that we were holding back, because I know for myself, I feel very nervous right now, and I'm not sure why, but I do want to also share with everyone today that Chanel and I go a long way back. We go all the way back to incarceration together and homelessness. And the reason that I do this work and I'm so passionate about it is because I've been homeless. I've lived in my vehicle I've struggled with addiction in my past. I'm justice impacted. I have domestic violence as a part of the story of why I ended up in my car in the first place, as Bill just mentioned, or as Harold mentioned a moment ago. And I have severe trauma from my childhood, like every single index marker that you could have for being high risk for homelessness and substance use disorder I had. And today, just through the grace of God and the opportunity that I had through the prison system and the trauma that came along with it, I'm able to try to advocate and to try to make things different. So that's not the only way out. Because when I was living in my car, that was my biggest fear, was having my car and my driver's license and all of my clothing and my hygiene and my ability to take a shower, everything I own just in one fell swoop taken. And of course, when I wasn't able to keep my tabs current, that's exactly what happened. And then I went from living in my vehicle to living in a tent on the streets. And I was desperate for a way out. And I was desperate to have somebody like myself now show up that could look me in the face and say, I see you. I know that you're here and I know that you matter and I know that you need help. And it was not there. I wasn't in King County, but in Snohomish County, there was no such thing as outreach that was coming out to let me know that somebody still cared and to help direct me to the areas or the places that I needed to go to get the help that I desperately needed. And so prison was the only way out for me. When I first ran into Chanel down in Georgetown, it took her a minute before she finally approached me and said, do you remember me? Because we were incarcerated together before I went to prison and she was released to the streets. And that's the difference between where she's sitting right now and where I'm sitting. And that should not be the only option that people have, because the trauma that is experienced in the justice system today is remarkably more than you experience when you live on the streets. But for that reason, like I desperately, I am pleading with you guys to take a really hard look at the value and the importance of the work that we're trying to stand up here, because the outreach worker that shows up and smiles at you and is trustworthy and is willing to hear your story and build a relationship with you is really the only way out for many of the folks that I talk to on the street every day. And the only hope that a lot of people see, because that's not how they feel seen by the community at large or by the businesses that they're camping in front of, or the people that they see at the grocery store. Like that's not how, as a homeless person, you feel like you're seen by the people around you or your community. And these really are our neighbors. They really are as significant and as important as anyone else that's sitting here in this meeting today, or that is sitting in church next to you. There's no difference except for a few bad choices or a few bad luck experiences. And the childhoods that lead a lot of people out into the homeless community that I hear every single day from my clients, like there's not one single person that's living outside because something happened, because something didn't happen to create that reality for them. So Harold, I really appreciate you calling that out. It's hard to step up in front of a bunch of professionals and to speak that kind of truth and to share that kind of thing with people, because the stigma is very real. And when I come toe to toe with police officers in encampments, when someone like Chanel calls me and says they're trying to take my home right now, my biggest fear is please don't run my name, because you will start talking to me differently. And if I'm the only person, or Bill's the only person that can speak to the business owner or parking enforcement, and the difference is this person loses their home and everything they own, like we're trying to stand this work group up so that people like Chanel can speak to and stand up and have a voice of their own. Chanel, you have an incredibly strong voice, and I'm really glad that you decided to come here and to share today. Thank you.
John, Chanel, everyone, just know that you're loved, your voices are powerful, and don't feel afraid, to speak your truth.
Harold, can I just add really quickly something that came up earlier in Mark's presentation about faith communities? I'd like to lift the church council. They are a critical ally. Pastor Anderson, your colleagues in your congregation and others are critical allies. We certainly need that kind of help with vehicle residents also. Maybe not with the RVs, but maybe with safe parking through Linda and Urban League. But we need and I know the energy is there in the faith community. So Michael, you and Carrie, however you can, we are not as big as you are. So when Interfaith was mentioned, I just dreaded it. I thought, oh my God, another job. But we will help the best we can. So.
Do we have any other questions from the folks on the implementation board today that we can answer maybe for you?
I think Mark and Karina have their hands up.
Oh, I did not even see that. Karina, I'm not sure who is up next, but
Mark's first.
Mark.
And I also see board member McHenry. So I'll be brief. I want to elevate two quick things, 2.5. And I know that we are at almost at time maybe for this agenda item, but one is I just want to lift up that this is why I have been heavy-handed in my implementation of peer navigation. Like everything that Dawn just said is why I have been very clear that like we're doing this. And I need to be clear about that, right? Because like as a person with lived experience, as a person who, like is accountable to my community, to other people with lived experience, this was simply like it was a non-negotiable for me from jump. And I just want to be open about that, right? That like it is what Dawn laid out there is literally like I can't underscore enough that it is quite literally the difference between life or death for people to be seen and understood and know that they are being seen and understood, right? And so when people have asked, right, this question, which I find frankly quite maddening, of like, well, navigation to where, right? They don't seem to understand that currently, right, like what we don't have the capacity for people to again just be basically seen, right, and to even ask questions about like some of the stuff that Bill raised about the tag. Like people aren't able to ask basic questions about what will happen to them, what will happen to their belongings, what resources are even available or not in the present system. So this idea of what we would navigate people to is deeply frustrating to me because the answer is quite frankly, everything. I'm done.
Don, I think you're still muted.
I think I'd just like to share my passion, which is, this is Karina O'Malley. I have had the great privilege of seeing the harm reduction that safe parking programs can achieve. And for 10 years, I've had the blessing of being able to be in relationship with folks living in their cars and to see what a difference it makes to have the safety of knowing that your car is safe. It's not going to be ticketed. It's not going to be impounded. And the opportunity for the community to offer their resources to folks because they're easy to find if they're in a safe lot, and to be able to make those connections between other resources and to honor the talents and gifts that folks who live in vehicles bring with them, because our system in King County for so long has said, if you want services, you need to get out of your vehicle. And that vehicle is a huge resource that a vehicle resident brings to the table. And we need to honor that and support it and bring what we can bring so that we can work together. So I have helped other folks open safe parking lots, and I want to contribute that expertise to this group and to the Regional Homelessness Authority, because I really believe in the model and I really think that it helps build community.
This is Linda Taylor. I echo everything she said because we also run safe parking lots and they work. We have had, I guess one of my most impactful stories was a young lady that came that was an airline stewardess, was pregnant, ran out of all of her sick leave, whatever, lost her place to live and was living in her car. This was a young lady that was employable, lived in her car. We put her in safe parking. I believe less than 30 days. We took her out of safe parking, got her a job, and got her a home with the help of United Way. But all of these services are not combined into one service. We have one grant for safe parking, another for outreach, another one to put you into a place, another one to get you employment. So we have to put them all together to make one. And that's what we did for her. She actually spoke at our annual breakfast one year and gave the speech about her life and her story. Pastor Anderson, I've sat next to people at church, gone down to the altar to pray. Girl, I gotta talk to you kind of conversation. And they had some of the same issues. And I've tipped out of church and spoken with some of these people that were living in their cars that I had no idea were living in their cars. We put them in safe and sanitary parking and got them into housing and got them reemployed. So I beg of you to assist us in piecemealing and putting some of these packages together so we have one place to do our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon, it looks like your hand was up next, and then Chanel or Harold, which one was first?
I'll let Chanel and Harold figure that out, and just want to say three things very briefly. Really appreciate this conversation, this very focused and courageous conversation. It's so very important. Number two, I think this is the right place for folks who are involved with safe parking, vehicle residencies, RVs, that the regional authority as designed is the right place to have this conversation, to set expectations and to develop a path forward. When I was listening to the infrastructure report out, it really hit me that what I probably need, and maybe other members of IB or the community need is at some point with you folks working with the regional authority, what is the vision around a stable, and don't take my words literally, but infrastructure and a system of safe parking, vehicle residencies that works for King County, the region, and then understanding what are our various roles and opportunities to either advocate for that or to resource and support the implementation of that vision. So I'm looking forward to learning more and to support this important element of housing stability. Thank you all again for the courage and the truth, speaking truth to power. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gordon. Chanel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that people in RVs are tired of being the problem, and so we really we're looking forward to finding the solution together. And I think this is the only way it's really gonna happen. And the safe parking lot in the past hasn't worked in King County because they didn't allow us to do anything. They didn't allow anyone to park there or to have any input or have any structure or have showers. What we've been talking about is actually getting like tiny homes where we actually have opportunities to build hygiene stations, have donation stations, have a community kitchen, and outreach and I think it's really possible if we just give it a chance, you know. But everyone just looks at RVs like we're homeless, but we're not homeless. We have homes. We just want to be a community of homes together. That's all. So that's it.
Thank you, Chanel. I think in response to your comment, Gordon, there's no one vision. I think there are different folks and different visions for different people. So we've been talking about things like just safe street locations, safe zones, safe parking. I personally see the idea of like a permanent, safe, long-term, something that looks very much like a trailer park with wheels on the trailers. And then we also have, you know, definitely the idea in mind that until there is adequate housing in the Seattle area, we are going to have longer term solutions that may not necessarily be permanent solutions. We also have a lot of clients that would rather not be in their RVs, but it's better than being in a tent or a structure. And it's got a door that locks and windows that roll up and some degree of safety and independence. And so I don't know that there's going to be one specific vision, but I think that it's not going to be a single formula, but I think that we can come up with formulas that work for different groups of people who have different visions for their own life, and get to choose what trajectory is important to them in setting their own goals, which is ultimately the idea of harm reduction, is letting folks choose and have the agency to control their own destination, really. So thank you so much for hearing us. Just want to make sure we didn't have any other hands that I'm missing. Harold, where'd you go? There you are.
I'm still here. This is more of a technical issue. It was brought up twice today, and I think it probably needs a little more explanation of why do we need it, but a by names list. And please, can someone do the technical explanation for me or for the board?
I can do that. A by name list is at this point a best practice in homelessness work nationally. It is essentially like putting into practice, like it's just a tool for relationship, right? So systems that have demonstrated that they actually are able to reduce homelessness are systems that know the names of everyone who needs them and know the needs of everyone who needs them, right? And so I think that when we say, you know, by name list or BNL, oftentimes a lot of the policy jargon that we use is dehumanizing, right? But like really what we're talking about with a by name list is a piece of architecture that supports relationships, right? And one of the things I think that, you know, I've had a lot of conversation with, you know, outreach staff across the county around is just, you know, making sure that like as we set up metrics, as we, you know, sort of shift away from some of what Bill named as sort of like useless data, right? That we are focusing on data and data quality that actually enhances people's ability to do their jobs, right? And so saying like, hey, can you know the names and needs of everyone you work with is basically just saying like, hey, can you build relationships with these folks, right? Like, so that like, you know, we know that you know what they need and what supports folks need. We at the county level have a couple by name lists already, most notably in the vet space and in the family space. There are pretty active BNLs that are relatively high quality. And then at operational level, we often generate by name lists when we are looking to resolve complex encampments, right? So for example, we are supporting some work at Woodland right now where we're trying to gradually resolve that encampment, right? Like so that we are you know, not engaging in harmful practice, but are actually like getting to know people, getting to know what their needs, and then supporting their exits. And so we developed a by name list of everyone who lives in the encampment, and then focused on then supporting people to access the resources that they need. We have not, and this is where we are headed, right? Actually created a unified by name list architecture, right? That allows us to see across all populations. And most notably, if I'm just being really candid, because, you know, I'm vibing today, like we consistently ignore creating that kind of architecture for our single adult population, right? Like, and so the kind of investment and work necessary, and like single adult does not necessarily mean you are single, it means you are classed as a single adult by the system, right? But like, those are the folks who consistently have the least system architecture supporting them, and requires us, frankly, to do a very different orientation.
Did that answer the question for you, Harold?
Yes. More than I could have appreciated. No, it's been something that's been floating around for, I don't know, the last few months. And I just thought, no one's ever given a technical, I haven't heard a technical explanation of it. So.
I think one of the most important things that a by name list, an accurate, well-working by name list can offer is the ability to really see this story of how people are, like, what's happening to an individual over time. And just in the relationships that I have with, like, say, I'm still in very close contact with the very first clients that I met when I very first started doing outreach at Reach. And I know what's changed and happened to them in the 3 years that I've known them. And I've also seen a lot of my clients deteriorate so much in the time that I've known them. And what's unfortunate right now is that the funding that we have available, either you're on this really high level where, like Linda was talking about, some one thing, and so many people live paycheck to paycheck. So all it takes is that one thing where they lose that paycheck and then they are in their cars. And so they're very close to being able to just get that nudge back into a somewhat stable position where they're back in housing, they're back in employment. Or we have these folks who have been either in the homeless community for so long that they've deteriorated so much, or they started out with something like, say, severe, an accident or something that changed their ability to work or have a job. And now they are at such a severe end of the spectrum that we actually have permanent supportive housing available to them. But we have this gigantic gap in the people who just need the little nudge and the people who now need permanent supportive support or housing and case management. There's this huge gap of people where I fell into, where someone like Chanel falls into, where I was young, I was white, I was relatively healthy, and there was nothing available. There was nothing. And until I had gotten infected or gotten enough medical problems or gotten enough mental health, and even mental health doesn't really qualify, right? But even if you start out being homeless and you have no mental health, you will have mental health problems by the time you're done. Like not even a year into that, you will have mental health issues, trauma, challenges, and things that you're going to take with you moving forward. So if we can do anything that's different at the RHA and with the Vehicle Residency Workgroup, it's that recognizing that just because somebody has not deteriorated to the point where their quality of life is now permanently impaired, but that we can actually lift folks out of that before that happens so that they can still have a quality of life that's worth having, and they can still be able to contribute to the society that they're living into in a meaningful way, so that they can still, I feel like I have a very rewarding purpose in my work that I do. I feel like I contribute well to my community and my society. But when I was walking around homeless, nobody I met on the street believed that.
Right? I want to add something, Dawn. I think someone just put a message in the chat about this. I was going to add, we're facing an onslaught with the moratorium ending for evictions. It's the first place people will choose to go. We don't really have a plan in place for any rapid rehousing of people who would not always be so hard to house, except for an eviction record, which is an enormous thing to overcome. So I know RHA, we're throwing a lot on your plate, more than it'll fit, but these are the kind of things we have to talk about, and we will see these new folks on the streets who are there for the first time. Often they'll probably be families, and we'll have to find Mary's Place or the right access point, entry point for them. But I just know that that's coming, You know, Seattle has stalled it again, I think. I'm trying to keep up, but the county hasn't and other cities haven't. And that will be the first choice for those who have a vehicle to live in it. So we're aware of this, in spite of what the wonderful stuff Dawn talked about of getting to know people one by one, and what Mark's talking about with a by name list. We're going to have far more people than we can keep up with. And I'm just really worried about that. So I just want to throw that in as one of the urgencies about the kind of funding that is going to be needed to be added to this system.
I'd like to add one other thing while we're talking on that, Bill. You hit on the rentals, that the moratorium or the foreclosures are headed our way also. And so that'll be another group that will be in their cars.
Mike, did I see you raising your hand? Michael, did you want to?
Yeah, yes, if I just might make a comment first to thank you, Dawn and Chanel and Patricia and Kelly for sharing of yourselves and your experiences in teaching us today. It's been profound and will reshape some of our work as an implementation board. And thank you, Bill and Karina, whom I've known and worked with for many years, and Linda as well. Appreciate your leadership in our community. I'm struck by the role of the implementation board, and I'd like to see some work done toward concrete outcomes. I know Bill's faithful presence over the last year speaking to these issues at every meeting, and it's time to act. And we need to find a way to move the RHA to concrete support. And that includes, in my mind, assigning a staff person from RHA to work with the vehicle residency group to focus on supporting the outcomes and goals that the vehicle residency.
So, Sister Ruby, I'm in a meeting right now. I'm going to call you back.
So to work with the subcommittees so that the deliverables are accountable, that we can respond to them. Secondly, to develop a funding proposal for the next budget cycle, which Mark said begins next week. So what does a dollar amount look like to fully fund the vehicle work that has been developed so far? The plans are there. Karina put in the chat an excellent vision for the goal, and to start to look toward moving toward that vision concretely, so that the vehicle residency work is not seen as apart from the work of RHA, but a part of the work of RHA together. It is not a separate subsection of work on homelessness, but it's an integral part of it. And it has to be established as such and publicly announced. I say it also as someone who's been a longtime advocate as well. Bill probably knows as well as anyone that to go advocating in 39 cities for laws that actually uphold and affirm people who experience homeless is a very difficult task. It would be better to establish some best practices and policies that can be used as models so that the cities are also accountable for the people who reside there. So I'll leave it at that, but I would like to see concrete steps taken by this implementation board to support the experiences that we heard today.
And I would like to just offer my comment as well behind Michael. I really would like to see us as a group, RHA, really reach out to the faith community. A lot of our churches have parking lots that could actually serve as a resource for this vehicle residency program that we're trying to implement and trying to expand. And then there's some Black churches, some of my colleagues are sponsoring tiny houses, and they really want to work with the RHA. And we haven't been really effective in reaching out to them. And so I know of at least 3 of my colleagues that have tiny house programs. and they really want to, and the membership is behind it, and they really want to see it flourish and go, but they can't do it by themselves. And I would hope that the RHA can serve as a collaborative partner with that effort. At First AME, we have housed single women in the past and would be open and looking at doing that again. It was overnight shelter, and just the funds ran out. The group we were working with just did not have the capacity to fund it. But these are programs when we are working together in collaboration and really doing substantive outreach. It's together that we can make some systemic changes. So that's what I wanted to offer and the comment. And Don, I'm just praising God for you and all of those that you work with.
Thank you, Carrie and Michael. I really appreciate your support today. And we in the Vehicle Residency Work Group have been asking for a dedicated individual to be able to follow through on the things that we're really talking about. Most of the work that's being contributed right now by the 23, give or take, regular members on these work groups, those hours are being taken out of regular work schedules and regular work demands because we all work somewhere else or we don't work. And we're living outside and contributing incredibly valuable, critical, and like absolutely impossible to do this work input without people like Chanel and Patricia to be able to provide the kind of feedback that's real time on the ground, what does and does not work for folks that are going through this and that we're trying to serve right now. So if we could get funding just to get that started with somebody who can actually do the research, follow through on the work, and provide dedicated 40 hours a week to being able to make this work take place. Michael, you're absolutely right. It's not separate from homelessness, but it's been ignored by our homeless response in Seattle for so long that we felt like it was important for us to separate it so that it could be highlighted, so that it could start to be integrated into the work that's being done. Because we can't approach homelessness without including vehicle residents and affect any kind of change that's worthwhile. Simha?
Okay. Well, thanks, Don. Really appreciate all the work that y'all have done so far and that you've shared today. I actually had a question for Mark. Can you share just a little bit of, I know we're just about at the end of our time, but can you just share if we've been able to assign any RHA staff time to help support the vehicle working group?
Yeah, so we've got a couple staff assigned to the vehicle residency working group. I mean, like, to take us back to last budget cycle, I have a 7% operating budget. The staff is the staff that I have. So there's nothing else that's going to happen there without a significant expansion in authority staff capacity period, right? And I need to be very straightforward about that. Naomi, who's my special assistant, staffs 3 working groups, and then has rotating supports from other folks, depending on what the working group topic is. And on this working group, I believe the majority of the support comes from Lisa, and then occasionally some other staff who plug in around the edges. Naomi also staffs our high acuity working group. That one is done in collaboration with Shay Martinez and then Sparrow Carlson, and then also provides staff support for the outreach working group, which has a significant amount of overlap actually with the vehicle residency working group. And that one has some additional support also, I think, from Lisa there as well. So we do have dedicated staff pointed at the working groups to the capacity that we have, right? And so that I think is the context that I would add there. The only other thing that I would add is, like, in terms of like other concrete things, I just want to be, and I know we're at time, but And I see Don talking about Naomi doing a good job in the chat. So thank you, Don. But the other thing that I would lift up is just there have been really, to my mind, significant changes in the system already. I think that there, as the working group is lifted up, there's a lot of, I think what Don said is correct. There's catch up to do, right? Like vehicle residency has been set aside and behind for so long, but that doesn't mean we haven't had significant shifts. So like the way that we engage in severe weather response has been transformed by this working group with an eye on folks who are experiencing homelessness with vehicles. We also architected an emergency housing voucher path specific to folks who are living in vehicles as a result of this working group and other work that myself and Alexis and some other folks did back in the fall. That is actually where I first met Kelly, who was on earlier and talked about being housed through a voucher. And so, I do want to lift up that we are having a conversation about a path forward that this group has been really thoughtful about, and there is work to be done, and much of it has budget implication. But I do want to be clear that there has been shift in what how we do our work already.
Thank you for that, Mark. And I see we're at the end of our time, but Don and everyone else, really thank you. And I just want to say also, I love the way you've organized your group, like the breakdown of subcommittees, like the particular deliverables. To be able to provide specific recommendations is huge. So grateful for that, and for the personal and passionate stories that were shared today. We had as our last agenda item to have a brief update from Alexis Mercedes Rink regarding our sub-regional work. But to really give that justice, we're going to ask her to come back next month. But I am glad that we were able to take the extra time and spend it with the work group today. So I'm going to stop there and just thank everybody for coming to the meeting today, and especially everyone from the vehicle work group. Our next meeting will be April 13th from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And if I can ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Seconded? Or any second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. And any opposed? All right. We are adjourned. We'll see you in April. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.